Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. We have a million and one stories to get through this morning, as per usual. Ryan and Emily, great to see you guys.
Nice to see you.
So a little bit of a rundown. Actually, we're going to hopefully have a special guest, courtesy of Ryan is bringing this Delaware legislator. Ryan, give people just a breakdown of really quick TLDR, what is going on in Delaware right now, because it's super crazy and connects directly to national politics as well.
Delaware is using a very rushed and unusual process to completely upend its corporate law in order to help out Elon Musk and Tesla and Mark Zuckerberg and Meta. And I don't just mean because they're connected to their companies. It's particular about giving CEOs, and heads of companies more power as it relates to their shareholders and their independent boards. That could come up on Tuesday. And so it's this multi-billion-dollar effort to try to bend this already parasitic and wildly corrupt blue state of Delaware even further to their corporate will.
Yeah, and the thing that really precipitated this is a Delaware court struck down Elon's Tesla compensation package. Supposed to be like $56 billion, which is more profit than the company's made in its entire existence. And they basically said, look, you have a conflict of interest here. The board is completely controlled by you. They're basically your puppets. We are not going forward with this. And so this legislation, my understanding, is drafted actually by Elon's or Tesla's law firm.
Yeah, and then there's new information now that Meta lawyers were also involved in it because there's this Delaware investigation of Meta for some of the Cambridge Analytica stuff, and which involves shareholder complaints, and then some other problems. And Zuckerberg has threatened to leave Delaware. Musk has left Delaware with Tesla, and so everybody thought it was primarily driven by Musk, but it also seems like Zuckerberg is playing a key role here. And
a lot of class interest at work
Wilson-Anton, yeah, she'll be able to talk a little bit about. The vote is scheduled for Tuesday, and it's not a sure thing that it'll pass. But they obviously, you don't want to bet against the billionaires in Delaware.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and part of what's interesting here is this is a Democratic-controlled state. So good example of the corporate uniparty potentially at work, but there's been a lot of outcry over it. So we'll see how it all goes down. I wanted to start, we've got other news about Tesla. We've got this crazy story about China. We're going to start with Bernie and AOC at a rally yesterday, actually several rallies yesterday, huge turnout for them. We've got updates in terms of the Alien Enemies Act and court orders, et cetera. So try to get through all of that. But I wanted to start with this story. This is a wild one. So New York Times and Wall Street Journal are now reporting that Elon Musk was supposed to be briefed by the Pentagon on the U.S. military's plan for any war that might break out with China. To U.S. officials it indicated that was the case. To the New York Times, like I said, the Wall Street Journal ultimately confirmed. The White House is denying this, quite vociferously, and Elon is lashing out at quote-unquote leakers, which, if they're leaking information, I don't know, maybe that indicates that it is true. But obviously what's crazy about this, guys, is the fact that if it is true, which, I suspect it probably is, given you've got two relatively credible outlets reporting at this point, Elon has massive business interests in China. Tesla, U.S. is its number one market. Number two market is China. They have the huge gigafactory there. He's had high-level meetings with Chinese officials. It's a wild situation to have the world's richest man, a billionaire, who has such great business interest in China. SpaceX has actually been banned from doing any work in China because of the national security implications of some of the things that he's into. And so for him to be read in on our, these are highly classified, top secret plans for if the shit hits the fan and the U.S. goes to war with China, what our plan would be and what we would do is, Ryan, to say the least, pretty wild thing to be happening here.
Yeah, we've never had a situation like this before, where somebody has had this deep of a financial link to China, intimately involved with, the work of the president. What I don't quite understand, and maybe Emily, you have some insight into this. Well, why on earth does he need this briefing? Assuming that it's true, is Elon Musk some military strategist that is going to sit down with the generals and look at their game plan and say, well, because what I know about Starlink, and suggest that the way to actually do this is why I like. I've seen his thought process and the way he approaches things on Twitter, and I've never been like, that's what we need in the Situation Room. But maybe I'm just missing some of his genius.
I got nothing, guys. This is insane. It's insane, and it was entirely predictable. And Krystal, you're right. They're denying it vociferously. Like Pete Hegseth, Sean Parnell, even Trump himself, they have all come out and said this is absolutely not true.
Okay, good. There we go.
But you know what? I don't even think. Maybe I'm being.
Those are honest guys, right? They'd never shade the truth.
and maybe I'm being what's the right word for this? I don't know. Maybe naive, but I can't imagine that this would not be happening every day anyway. Like this, I don't know that this particular instance is as disturbing as the fact that Elon Musk's job, he's not the head of Doge, he's not the head of what became Doge at USDS, he is a White House advisor. That's an illegal filing. He is a White House advisor. He's an advisor to the President of the United States. So I just don't, I imagine things almost as disturbing as this are happening on a daily, if not hourly basis anyway. So it was always going to be that way. Someone has massive business interests in China. This is a White House that's and a State Department and a Pentagon that's very focused on China. So anytime he's in meetings or speaking with people, I mean, he's just by osmosis, at the very least by osmosis, soaking up a lot of this.
Yeah. The Wall Street Journal has this explanation of why he's getting the briefing. To Ryan's point, it says Musk, according to one person familiar with the arrangements, is receiving the briefing because he asked for one. He has a security clearance, but isn't in the military chain of command or known to be a military advisor to Trump. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed Musk would visit the Pentagon on Friday in a statement on X. Hegseth disputed that he would receive a sensitive China briefing, saying it is an informal meeting about innovation, efficiencies, and smarter production. But I guess, that's the alleged answer, is he's getting the briefing because he wanted to get the briefing.
And that seems to be confirmation that it actually is about, potential war with China. What it sounds like what Musk asked to be briefed about is what is China's production capacity when it comes to, military capacity, and what is the U.S. production capacity, which are legitimate questions for anybody who cares about the U.S. like fighting a war with China to ask, because it does appear like right now, if we actually did get in a war, we spend $1 trillion a year on our military, yet it doesn't seem like we can keep up with them when it comes to manufacturing capacity.
Yeah, that's right.
Everybody fires off their stuff in a month. Month 2, China's looking pretty good, and we're not looking so good. So it seems like that's what Musk wants to talk about, and then that Hegseth answer seems to suggest that is what was going to to talk about, because
that's what innovation is.
Yeah, innovation, production, like that. Like, what else could that be about? So it doesn't mean that he was like being read in on where the subs are going to be and where the aircraft striker groups are going to be. So maybe that's where they're doing their furious denials, because it's not that, but it still is. It's the more important part.
We also don't
war with China.
We don't know, and there's no way for us to know other than their denials about where the line is allegedly. So I mean, that's even at the best case scenario where you have this private tech baron coming into the government to make it more efficient, and he particularly is focused on cutting the Pentagon. If he has business overseas, China, Israel, Ukraine, Russia, whatever it is a insane conflict of interest. We're all aware of that at this point, and there's no check on what we are able to discern. Like, we have absolutely no way. He's supposed to be filing waivers according to the DOJ special government employee status. We don't know what information he's receiving. We have no idea how that's influencing his business. There's absolutely no way that he's able to separate public and private mentally. If you're getting information because of your clearance and because of the fact that you work in the White House, there's absolutely no way that doesn't influence at some minimal level, in the best case scenario, the way that you're handling your business. So it is just insane. Of course, Doge was always going to be a glaring conflict of interest, and Playbook read these vociferous denials from Hegseth and Parnell and Trump as some type of admission that there's a line for Elon. And that's interesting because I guess there's some truth that publicly maybe there's shame. There's still a modicum of shame about having like a tech baron come in and a defense contractor come in. And granted, defense contractors have been determining the Pentagon budget for decades, but to have him come in as an actual government employee and making some of these calls, like maybe they still have a modicum of shame about it. I don't know. I guess.
No, that's a good point. At least they didn't say, so what if we gave them our China war plans?
Yeah, which was a possibility that they would, like these liberals are melting down over, us giving Elon Musk, who's just a brave patriot, sacrificing himself for the public good, these war plans. But I think, Emily, to your point, like it just brings home how insane the whole situation is, how insane the entire situation is. This man is he's not just a Pentagon contractor, he's one of the larger Pentagon contractors. And to be honest, Doge hasn't really touched the Pentagon at all, which is interesting and telling in and of itself, given that, if you actually wanted to cut out waste, fraud, and abuse, that would probably be the first place that you would really dive into. But, we know from reporting about what he's done at the FAA, he's tried to just sort of, kneecap his competitors there with regard to Starlink and shift contracts to him. We know there's been an effort to shift some of the rural broadband funding to Starlink. And, there may be a actual case for these things. Like Starlink is a good product. It works well. And it's been good for me out here in rural Virginia before we got broadband out here, et cetera. But to just be able to go in and himself and his lackeys be like, we're taking that money. You're not getting it anymore. You're fired. You're hired. Here's how we're doing things. We're hoovering up your data, et cetera. When you have this sort of a news item, hit the front page, it just really brings home like this whole thing is crazy. Absolutely crazy. So, Emily, I'm curious, this just came out yesterday evening. What is the reaction from the right been thus far? Or do they believe the denials? Is it uncomfortable for them? Has there been a backlash? Like, have you seen what the general sort of vibe and approach has been?
I think it's been, I don't think this changed anything on the right. I think people are, have sort of made their peace with the Elon of it all, that you don't have Doge without Elon and you don't have Doge without Trump. And in order to, and you don't have like massive cuts without Doge. So, it's the simple, I guess, reconciling with this insanity. And again, like I said earlier, it's not as though, I think this is what makes it easier for people on the right to swallow, is that it's not as though we haven't had essentially defense contractors and private enterprise, well, probably private enterprise, determining what the Pentagon budget is for a really long time. So it's sort of like, okay, so this guy says he wants to do some good. He's actually in this for, not just for himself, but for, the country. And he actually wants to make cuts and et cetera. Like, I think that's how it's continuing to be rationalized because, it's true. The Pentagon has been raided by defense contractors for decades. And to Ryan's point, in ways that leave us less safe, arguably. So, I mean, that is what allows it to be sort of justified in the minds of a lot of people on the right. And I don't think anything is necessarily going to change that at this point, unless Trump makes some break with Elon, or unless Elon, again, the H-1B like dust up. I think he has learned from that. And so those are the only sorts of things, like when he is sort of explicitly subverting MAGA or trying to hijack MAGA, which I think he's probably doing every day, to be honest with you. Although MAGA is what Trump says it is, and Trump says Elon is great, so maybe Elon is truly MAGA. But
yeah, Trump says Elon's right about H-1Bs. So
that's right.
So yeah, it is MAGA. It is, I guess it's dark MAGA now, the Elon version of MAGA, which has quite a different flavor. There's a bunch of Elon news. Let's just roll to the next thing. Continues to have some major issues over at Tesla. They have now recalled more or less every single Cybertruck after this glued stainless steel trim apparently can fall off. I'd actually seen some complaints about this before this recall occurred. 151 Cybertruck owners had filed warranty claims after noticing this roof trim panel above the windows was coming loose. It's this panel that goes right along. You can see actually here, this part here. And it's just glued on. And sometimes it says it's vulnerable to environmental embrittlement, meaning it doesn't hold up as well as it should. And if this thing, you're driving down the highway and this piece comes flying off at some other car, needless to say, that is quite a risk. And obviously, Ryan, this comes at a time when Tesla is, it's the most visible symbol of Elon, and sales have been plummeting globally, right? Here, Europe, they've fallen off a cliff. Canada, they're down like 60, 70%. They're down in China. You not only have the primary driver, I think, is Elon just being such a, polarizing and toxic figure at this point, but you also have a stale product line. You also have incredible competition coming from China. We just covered this week, BYD now has a battery that can charge 300 miles in 5 minutes, which is just like, game-changing level of technology. So the stock has been falling. Trump has been selling them in the White House lawn. Sean Hannity's doing his part. The Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, is out there telling people to buy the stock, et cetera. Actually, funnily enough, the stock then went down further after he said that. But, this is not a great moment for Elon to have this particular problem with the Cybertruck.
It's a really peculiar strategy, from a business perspective. The buyers of electric vehicles have consistently been people who are kind of on the center left and have concern about climate change and their impact on the environment. So to me, it would sort of be like if the CEO of like Smith & Wesson went and joined the Kamala Harris administration.
And Rachel Maddow's posing with the Smith & Wesson, telling everyone to get a Smith & Wesson.
Posing with Rachel Maddow and talking about how the NRA is a giant scam and corruption, and all Republicans are corrupt, and just like having this really presenting this like really vitriolic worldview and calling all Republicans and anybody who supports Trump, traitors to the country and fascists, and then suggesting that maybe they should be jailed, that their news outlets and their news anchors should actually be imprisoned. And then China makes a whole bunch of better guns, and you watch the sales of Smith & Wesson collapse. You're like, gee, what's going on here? This is why do they hate us so much? They're so filled with hate. We just make a nice product that shoots straight. Just what if you don't like it? You don't like it. We don't have to burn it down. So yeah, it's secure. Like I said, bold strategy to just constantly insult and call your customer base traitors. And I guess we'll see how that works out for them.
Well, I think we have Representative Madinah Wilson-Anton standing by to give us an update on this Delaware bill that Ryan was talking about before. Let me go ahead and let her in, and we can get to that interview.
Oh, excellent.
Representative, great to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So Ryan set this up a little bit about what's going on in Delaware, how this connects to Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, et cetera. But, as a legislator there, we'd love to hear your perspective of what this bill does and why it's become such a lightning rod.
Sure. So I'll say the premise for all of us as legislators is we're trying to make sure that our state's budget is solid, right? And I'm not sure how much you guys know about Delaware's budget, but a large part of it comes from the corporate franchise. So what we've been told,
like $1 billion a year or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like 1.3, but if you look at other kind of ways that it also impacts us, some folks are saying it's almost half of our budget. And so it's a really important part of what keeps Delaware going. And so the arguments that we've been told is basically there's these companies that want to leave, and for each company that leaves, it's $250,000. You guys know we're looking at a federal government that's likely to cut a lot of funding that's coming to our state. And so we're really not, looking to lose funding. What concerns me is the folks that we're supposed to look to as knowing whether this is how to save the franchise, which is basically what we're told we're doing, are from a very small minority. So we have like 2 million corporate entities here in the state. Of those 2 million, about 3,000 of them are the ones that are really making our budget, and less than 300 are controlled companies. And, the only folks that I'm hearing
What's
from,
a controlled company for people who are?
So companies that have someone like Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg that's calling the shots. But even of that subset, a lot of the time the dynamic is such that the controller is not the one with the power in the dynamic. It's the board. And so the controller is going to the board like, hey, I want to make these, decisions. Can I get some more money? Can we talk about different ideas? These like charismatic controllers like Elon, Mark Zuckerberg, and others really represent a very small minority of those companies. So what concerns me as someone who's looking at like just numbers here is of those 3,000 companies, and we're talking about now 200 to 300 companies, a minority of that subset, right, are folks like Elon who want to just be able to run roughshod over shareholders, minority shareholders. And I look at that and I'm like, why would I alienate the majority of my customers for a select few when they're all paying $250,000, right? Just because Tesla's huge, they're capped at the same amount as any other company in that bracket. So it's been really confusing. It's, I'm not a corporate lawyer. This is not my like bread and butter. It's been a really difficult bill to try to wrap our heads around. And it feels like it's being pushed very quickly because they want to basically save Zuckerberg billions in court fees. Like, and that's like, it's crazy. Like I'm looking at the national news as someone from Delaware, watching Elon attack our judges, watching like this attack on our democracy, and then seeing it happen here. And I'm like, wait, what? We're Democrats. Why are we doing the same thing here? It's really scary.
And there seems to be another interesting layer to the conflict of interest here. I'm curious if this is kind of in the back of legislators' minds. So it's not just that Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, can threaten to leave and take with them. I didn't realize it was only $250,000. Like that's not that much, in this scheme of your budget. Like, okay, Mark Zuckerberg, goodbye. We'll do a GoFundMe, or you could, do a half-cent sales tax. Delaware has no sales tax, but I know you'd probably get thrown out of office if you even, suggested.
You're not going to get me to
no.
What are you doing to her, Ryan? Stop it.
It's fine. It's regressive. Good. No sales tax is fine. But the other layer of the conflict of interest is that Elon Musk is also a White House advisor, and you pointed out that your budget is linked to federal support for states, and which can be throttled up or down, to the degree that a president is satisfied with how a state is operating. So that it's not just the $250K. Like Elon Musk could actually be like, now Zuckerberg isn't a government employee, but he's close with Trump. So is that something that's in the back of lawmakers' minds? Like, okay, we're not that worried about this $250,000 that we'll lose if Facebook leaves, but what we're worried about is retribution from the federal government.
Absolutely.
So we better just give them what they want.
Absolutely, yeah. I can say 100% that that's in folks' minds. What I would argue is we're already on the list. It's not just California. Like we're already on the list. You can type into X. I still call it Twitter, but you can type into the search bar, Elon Musk Delaware, and find tons of tweets. He does not like our state. He thinks our judges are woke activist judges, which I'll just say as a leftist. Delaware Court of Chancery, not a bastion of left. But
it'd be nice if they were.
Here, I guess. But like he doesn't like Delaware. We're not on their list of states that's going to do well, right? We're going to be struggling regardless of whether this bill passes. What worries me is one, it's not just the Elons and Zuckerberg. It's lots of other folks that will benefit from this that want to go to other states like Nevada, like Texas. And I feel like if we're racing to the bottom for those folks, we are alienating really like the majority of our customers, which is the term that they use. And it's like kind of makes my stomach hurt. But our customers, right? Like the majority of those folks do not support this legislation. And we've heard from like tons of pension funds. We heard from the largest pension fund in California last week. Like they're very worried about this legislation and how it's going to impact minority shareholders, pensioners. Like why would we alienate them when we're never gonna, like I just keep saying, like, we got to stop simping for billionaires. Like, they're never going to come back. They're never going to like us. So at least go after folks that maybe will continue to stay here. And, you know, it's often talked about that people come to Delaware because it's like this offshore place where there's no rules and whatever. But what really brings companies to Delaware is the fact that our Court of Chancery has been a mainstay for over like a century. Like it's one of the oldest courts in the world. And so there's a lot of precedent. And so lawyers, they encourage companies to incorporate here because they know what they're getting into. And what scares me as a Delaware legislator is passing a bill like this that is obviously written to benefit a rich few. It really attacks that reputation, and it makes it seem like Delaware is a state now where our laws are written by the highest bidder.
And how are your constituents reacting to this?
Oh my God. Have you ever heard of a DDoS attack? My email inbox is unusable because I've gotten so many emails from constituents that are telling me to vote no. Like I
Really?
posted something, I don't even remember what I posted on Instagram, and I had constituents in the comments like, yeah, but what are you doing about SB 21? I emailed you and you didn't respond. And so I like made a Canva post and put it on there, and I'm like, this is my position, guys. Like, I can't respond to everyone because I literally can't use my inbox. I got a notification from Outlook that was like, you got too many emails at once, so we just shut it down.
This doesn't seem right.
And you represent how many people?
About 26,000 Delawareans.
Right.
Yeah,
So
and we're a state of less.
If you only have 26,000 constituents, and you're hearing from how many of those are constituents, and how many of those are people who are just getting worked up from out of state?
Honestly, Ryan, I didn't click through all 2,000 and take the address and put it in. Like, but I know basically all of us have gotten about that many emails. So, and I haven't heard from anyone saying to support it. The only constituent of mine, this is a little joke, but it's true. The only constituent of mine who supports the bill that I'm aware of is the senator who introduced it.
And so now they had thought about putting it up yesterday. Sounds like because of the public pressure, that's not going to happen. We're looking at Tuesday. My understanding is it needs 2/3 to pass. So like, where are you in your support for building opposition? Like, how many numbers do you have, and how many more do you need by Tuesday?
I don't know, honestly. Like, one of the things, like, it's not my bill, so I'm not like whip counting for it. I'm just trying to do my thing. Like, I had some other bills that were pretty controversial in committee this week that I was focused on. I think I've been here now, this is my 5th year. Every year we do a bill like this. This is like the most egregious, but every year there's a bill like this that gets pushed through, and there's often not much time to actually push back to it. And so I was really surprised that it wasn't on the floor agenda yesterday. And the only reason that I can think of is because they don't have the votes that they need. It has a 2/3 threshold. So we need 14 people to say no or not show up. And I think we're pretty close. Otherwise, we would have already passed this bill, and someone would have already cut the ribbon on it for Zuckerberg and, probably had some fun on a yacht or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I've been trying to educate myself on, the ins and outs of this legislation. Like you said, it's fairly complicated, but not only would it help to enable Elon to get his $56 billion in compensation that had previously been blocked by a court, not only would it help Zuckerberg and Meta with what they're trying to do, but can you just briefly explain the piece about why this would also harm the ability of minority shareholders to be able to exercise influence within the company? Because I think that's an important part too that's sometimes under discussed with the Musk as the big sort of like flashing red light here.
Yeah. So for the Zuckerberg example, for example, right? Like, the reason why that would get thrown out has to do with books and records. And what we've heard is, controllers are really frustrated because they feel like every waking moment, someone's coming that has like 5 shares in a company. And they're like, I want to see all the emails about this exchange. Like, I want to know whether whether this transaction was fair to us. And, when I meet with them, I've met with everyone. Like, I can see how it's frustrating, to have to stop and pay someone to go through and within 5 days send all the emails and all the text messages and all that. But what they're saying is that this is a problem that's like over the past 5 years. We want to go back like 10 years to when people weren't texting and where they weren't emailing. And then when I look at the facts of the case with like Elon's compensation package, where the director who was part of the conversation is like besties with him. Elon says under oath on the record that there was no one to negotiate against, so he negotiated against himself. Right? Like clearly the minority shareholders were not, party to that conversation. And then that goes through, say it stays at $56 billion, right? If you were a Tesla shareholder right now, watching what Elon is doing to the value of your shares, is he really worth $56 billion? Like, imagine if that had not gotten overturned. Like, it's really hard for me to even process people making this argument, but they're like, well, people voted for it. People voted for it. They voted for it without any information about what the internal metrics were that they'd already hit. Like, he was supposed to be getting these bonuses if they hit this, if they hit that. They'd already hit them and they knew they were about to hit the next one. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a reach goal, right? Like, and that types of information comes out because you have plaintiffs' attorneys that actually do the investigations to make that case. And it's clear that these, tech oligarchs, they don't want any accountability. Like the messaging that we've been given is the court is out of balance. It's unpredictable. We need to restore balance. But what they're really saying is when it's balanced, we don't like that. We don't want balance.
Right.
And, pension funds don't want to invest in companies that are just going to throw money in the garbage and light it on fire because a guy wants to go to space and wants to, moonlight as a public servant. Like that's not good for minority shareholders. So folks are worried that if they do lose the ability to actually investigate these people, the companies that they invest in that are in Delaware are not safe investments.
Yeah. Well, at this point, it might be more financially advantageous to pay Elon Musk $56 billion to go away, given the way that he's helping to tank Tesla sales, the number of investors who are starting to come out and say, you know what, this is not going well.
I'm terrified of thinking of Elon Musk being $56 billion richer. Like, I mean, I don't
He's
even
already got more money than any of us could wrap our heads around, It's insanity. Utter insanity. Well, thank you so much, Representative, for helping us to understand this. It's been really, really useful to get your insights as someone who's trying to grapple with all of these issues and make sure, the state's okay and the state budget is okay and all of those good things too.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. We'll see you soon. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and pull up, guys. This is something I've been keeping track of just to stick on the Tesla conversation for one more minute. So the Financial Times, actually, Michael Kors really wants me to buy something. Financial Times flagged this accounting red flag, we'll call it, where, the way that this article frames it is Tesla's missing $1.4 billion, has accounting experts asking questions. I'll just read you a little bit here. So effectively, they have a mismatch between how much they say they invested in, property, plant, and equipment, those sorts of things, and how much of those sorts of assets are on the books. So the amount that they claim they invested is $1.4 billion lower than the amount they're now reflecting on the books. So there are some, potential innocent explanations for this. So they say Tesla spent $6.3 billion in capital expenditures in the last 6 months, but the gross values of their assets only increased by $4.9 billion, leaving $1.4 billion unaccounted for. There were a couple of other sort of questionable pieces with regards to Tesla's accounting. Including the fact that even though they claim they're sitting on $37 billion in cash reserves, they still raised $6 billion in debt last year at a time when interest rates are relatively high. So it's not the best time to be, raising debt. They also are not issuing any dividends whatsoever. And so there's a few things here that people who look at financial fraud are kind of scratching their head about. And, it tracks some with obviously Tesla is not doing well as a company for the reasons that we discussed before, Elon, stale product line, competition from China, et cetera. It also tracks with this weird Canada story where they desperately scrounge together potentially fraudulently, potentially because they had this long like backstock of EV rebates that they came in and cashed in right before the EV rebate program ended, which also sort of smacked of desperation. So I don't know. This is one just to sort of like put a pin in and keep an eye on. But Ryan, what did you make of the conversation with the Representative Wilson-Anton about the way she's thinking about this and how this is likely to go?
Yeah, that was enlightening in some ways. Because I didn't realize that Facebook, et cetera, are capped at how much they can spend. I know that Delaware is valuable to these companies because it's so cheap, and because there are very few. The rules are tilted in the direction of corporations. But I thought that every transaction, even though it's only $50 or a couple $100, depending on the size, to like register as an LLC in Delaware, like if you do a whole lot of different registrations, that's going to increase the amount. But it's interesting that they're even capped at $250K. So if it was just that, you would tell these, dozens of companies total that have these charismatic controlling CEOs to be like, okay, look, this is not the state for you. Like, that's why we have Nebraska and we have Nevada, and there's this race to the bottom with a bunch of these other states that see the amount of revenue Delaware makes from corporate registrations and wants to match that. So you guys go ahead and go there. But her point is accurate that corporations also want stability, and Delaware has, because of its Chancery Court, offered stability for many years. So it is interesting that Delaware could throw its entire system out of whack and kill the golden goose. Their golden goose is this, these corporations registering in Delaware. No offense to Delaware, if they killed their golden goose, good. Like Nevada, North Dakota, all these states that are doing this are parasites living off the rest of the country and the rest of the world. They get no sales tax and they get lower tax, so good for them. But like, that's what that ultimately is on the back of us.
Right, because they're winning the race to the bottom to get all of these corporations to register in these few handful of states rather than them being distributed across the country, across the world, et cetera. And
facing tougher regulation and consumer protections, and shareholder rights, et cetera. So, we get worse consumer protections, worse shareholder rights, lower corporate taxes, so that Delaware can have no sales tax. Like, it's not a good deal for the rest of the country.
Right.
So it'd be interesting if they screwed up, if they killed their own golden goose out of misplaced fealty to Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg.
This is one of the Lever News reports. They've been doing a really good job tracking this. I just wanted to give them a shout out. But one last thing I'll mention before we move on to some. Well, I mean, everything is Elon news, but not directly Elon news. Is you mentioned, Ryan, how they have to be concerned not just about, Elon and Bill Ackman and Mark Zuckerberg and these people are mad and they're going to leave the state, or they already left the state, or whatever. They also have to be worried about the full force of the federal government being trained directly on them. And I did a piece yesterday tracking the way this has looked for the state of Maine. I don't know if you guys remember, there was this like flap there was a governor's meeting and Trump calls out the governor of Maine because she isn't doing what he wants with regard to trans girls in sports, right? There's 2 trans athletes in the state of Maine and, she's not doing what he wants her to do. And so he basically said, I'll you're going to lose your funding, or we're going to see you in court, et cetera. Well, it's been way beyond it's not just a Department of Education investigation. It's an HHS investigation. It's a USDA investigation. It's National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration got involved, pulled their Maine Sea Grant, which is supposed to like support fishermen and, marine research.
Massively destructive to Maine to do that.
It actually, I mean, this is like
that's
a program that has supported thousands of jobs in Maine for years and years and whatever. Then, and this will connect to a story we're going to do later on, this Social Security Administration dude gets involved. He's the one who was put in charge because he went around the superiors' backs and gave the Doge hackers access to like whatever it is that they wanted. So he decides that he's going to cut the contract that allows the Like if you're a parent of a newborn, when you're in the hospital, to just check a box like, yes, please, I'd like a social security number. Now you're going to have to take your baby newborn to the social security field office, which has a line out the door to the extent it exists at all, to be able to get this social security number for your newborn. Also cut the same service for funeral homes. So when your loved one dies, you now have to go through the same, painful rigmarole, et cetera, out of retribution. He initially was like, oh, it's just an innocent mistake. And then later on admitted that he was mad about the way that the governor treated the president, was how he described it. Now, some of this stuff, because they happen to have a Republican senator, Susan Collins, has been rolled back, has been reinstated, because she was able to go and make her plea to, the king of begging for forbearance. And so some of these things have been put back in place. But, I'm sure Delaware is looking at that, is looking at the threats to California, is looking at, the treatment of all kinds of people's institutions, et cetera, that have gotten crosswise with this administration, are like, do we really want to play this game?
It's the mob. I
Yeah,
mean, really,
yeah,
it's the mob.
Nice state you got there.
Yeah. There's been a lot of power kind of on the table that hasn't been used by the federal government against states and against institutions and nonprofits because of norms that have built up over the last couple hundred years.
And not just norms, but also some legislation that, the big founding of the Republic, we had a lot of like this sort of patronage system that is very common. And then over time, there was actual reform and legislation put in place too, to try to ensure that the bureaucracy would be more or less neutral. And not to say that it's ever lived up fully to that ideal, but that was kind of the assumption, is that the bureaucracy would be neutral, whether it was you as a person, you as a state, you as a law firm, as is another relevant example right now, you as a media organization, et cetera. And that expectation, this administration is just completely tossed out the window. Now your expectation is that you will be targeted if you get crosswise with them.
It's interesting because
Emily, I think your mic went off.
Can you hear me? 1, 2, 3, 4.
I hear you,
super
but
low.
It's kind of quieter.
Oh, okay. Here,
there you
I
go.
don't do anything, but I'll just talk louder. But one of the things that is interesting about it is there were threats. The Obama administration threatened every K through 12 school, actually higher education too, first on the Dear Colleague letter on sexual assault, and then on the Dear Colleague letter reading gender identity into Title IX. And what Trump is doing is much more nakedly like, hey, I am the boss. I am, the guy in charge of this racket that we call the federal government, and you will comply with me. But I think some of it stems from, and I know this because I hear it on the right, watching the lesson of how federal funds were used for a long time by, the Obama administration is the best example, and the Biden administration. So some of it is like they took permission. They realized okay, so we're going to play this game, but we're going to play it way better than you guys ever did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point in the sense that the Obama Department of Education did, use the Ed Department in Title IX to pressure universities to change policies. And the difference now, of course, is that they're using the presence of Social Security offices to pressure a high school on trans athletes or something. It's like, what, at least with Obama, it's like, we're going to use university funding to try to pressure universities to do a thing. Whereas Trump is like, we're going to use Social Security money.
And
we're going to use Social
mess
Security.
with high schools.
We're going to threaten your C grant funding. We're going to use HHS.
We're going to kill all the lobsters.
USDA. Yeah. I mean, it's really like the whole government is going to try to screw you over. Yeah. And, one of the things that we have to think through going forward too is, we already know that they're using AI to scrub social media accounts to target dissidents, especially with regard to Israel. And, some indications that could be maybe some of what's going on to locate these quote unquote gang members, more on that in a moment, and, find their alleged tattoos that are so evil that they have to be disappeared into a foreign gulag. But they want to consolidate all of the data that the federal government has on all of us. And they want to use AI. So, it doesn't take a leap to imagine the way that you wouldn't even need a particular bureaucrat to hate you, like the Social Security dude hated Janet Mills, the governor of Maine, to have your experience with the government now be biased against you if you dare say one of the, forbidden words or hold a forbidden position or have criticized Elon or Tesla, God forbid, or Trump, etc. Like, there are the tools now to institute that level of weaponization down to the person by person level, even if you are basically like just a nobody, random, ordinary person who happens to have a political opinion. That's all I think at this point on the table right now, and to me is quite terrifying direction that we could very easily be headed in.
Well, and you have multiple private sector folks in the government with special government employee status who would have access to that sort of centralized.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. So I wanted to cover this story, getting to the latest with regard to the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act. The administration is claiming that this gives them extraordinary powers to basically round up and deport with zero due process whoever they want, and apparently ship them to this, prison in El Salvador known for human rights abuses and slave labor. They also think that it lets them have immigration agents enter homes without warrants. So right now you have the right to, if an ICE agent shows up at your door and they don't have a warrant, you don't have to let them in. And so now they're saying not only can we pick up whoever we want and, round them up, arrest them, deport them, no due process, etc., but we can just go into your home. We don't even need a warrant. Obviously, this is a violation, many people think, of illegal search and seizure, constitutional protections. Ryan, what did you make of this interpretation, truly maximalist interpretation that the administration is going with here of what they can do under this Alien Enemies Act?
Yeah, I mean, this is clearly the logical extension of their position. Like, their position is the Secretary of State's designation about a person is unreviewable. Therefore, Secretary of State can do whatever he wants. And the security forces at the direction of the Secretary of State can also do whatever they want. If it is true that somehow the Constitution forgot to put limits around what the Secretary of State can do to people inside the United States, then yeah, Secretary of State can do anything. And the courts have no jurisdiction. Now, the courts that have looked at this claim in the past, including apparently Donald Trump's federal judge sister, have said that no, that's an unconstitutionally vague law. Like, that's ridiculous.
Law.
Like, you can't. Like, the Constitution is very clear. There's no carve out from the Bill of Rights for the Secretary of State because he makes some determination.
Right. Where you say the magic words, oh, we're at war and it's an invasion, so now I can round up whoever I want.
Right. And also, we're not at war, as you pointed out previously. Like, being at war doesn't mean like your feelings are hurt by anything. It means that Congress has declared war, and Congress has not. So just like right there, but that feels like you're almost splitting hairs. The broader point is constitutional protections apply to actors of the state, no matter who they are, whether they're the Secretary of State or somebody else. But if you believe that they don't, then sure, they can come into your house, knock your door down, put you in shackles, put you on a plane, and throw you out the window of the plane.
Yeah. And whether you are a citizen, non-citizen, green card, all of these,
what's the matter? Secretary
because
of State
how would we ever
is
even
unreviewable
know if there's no due process?
His assertion is unreviewable according to them.
Yeah. Ryan, real quick, I want you to explain your reporting here before I want to get Emily to weigh in as well about we're starting to learn some of the details of the people who were disappeared into this El Salvador prison. And one of them is this Venezuela professional goaltender. Tell us a little bit about who this person is and what we know about how he even ended up on the radar of ICE, because he has no criminal record whatsoever. So, seems strange that he would be a target. But then again, the government in an official filing with the court admitted that, quote, many of the people that they sent to this, torture chamber had no criminal record whatsoever.
Yeah, and so firstly, apologize. Apparently, I should have called him goalkeeper, and goaltender is hockey.
Oh, okay.
I
was actually wondering that too. Yeah.
I'll
anyway.
correct that with apologies. I even played keeper in middle school, so I guess I should have known that.
My son likes to play goalie, so yeah.
So in any event, this guy, Jersey Reyes Barrio, he's a Venezuelan, a professional soccer player. They pulled his criminal record from Venezuela to show that he had absolutely zero criminal record there. In February and March of 2024, he participated in protests against the Maduro government. This was happening during the presidential election, in which Maduro was kicking his main opponent, or using his Supreme Court, which was allied with him, to kick his main opponent off the ballot. It kicked off a lot of protests. The United States ramped up sanctions against Venezuela. The United States, through USAID and other propaganda networks, pushed Venezuelan citizens to protest against the Maduro regime, supported the Venezuelan opposition to the fullest extent it could, after having launched several coups, attempted coups against the Venezuelan government. And so he came out to two of these marches. After one of them in March of 2024, he was picked up by Maduro security forces, tortured in an undisclosed location using electrocution and suffocation. According to his family, we found one of his family members' Spanish Facebook page in Venezuela, and also confirmed by an affidavit that his lawyer filed with the court. In March 2024, he fled Venezuela after getting tortured. He made an appointment using the CBP-1 app, which at the time, under the Biden administration, said if you report to a port of entry, then you can make your case for political asylum. September 2024. So this is under Biden, to be clear. He shows up at the port of entry and he says, "This is what happened to me. This is who I am. I would like, to apply for political asylum." They see his tattoo and they say, "That looks like a gang tattoo." And they arrest him basically on the spot. So we got a statement from DHS saying, that this guy was in the country illegally, which is an interesting way of putting it, because he legally approached CBP. He had an illegal appointment. He was then arrested. So was he in the country illegally while he was in detention? So they answer that however you want. He's put into maximum security because of this tattoo. His lawyer, and this is what, and we confirmed this with the family through this Facebook post, he gets a lawyer. The lawyer reaches out to family and is like, "I need his Venezuelan, criminal record," which they pull and send, and they even send him an affidavit from the tattoo artist who says this was a crown on top of a soccer ball, because he told me he loves Real Madrid. That's the Real Madrid logo, and this gang Tren de Aragua also has a crown in its tattoo that they use. He said he had no idea. So a crown is not the most obscure thing to get on a tattoo.
Yeah.
And so they also submitted a whole bunch of images of people who are not in the gang who also have the tattoo. Now, DHS said they found social media posts that also indicated he was in a gang. One of them, the only one that is public, is him going like this.
Yeah, I can pull that up actually.
And his lawyer's like, that's like sign language for "I love you," and it's also like, dude, rock and roll. Like, let's rock and roll. This is
the gang proof right here.
Anybody ever done this? Has anybody ever made that hand gesture? And so in April 17th, he was scheduled to have his final hearing, because this is what, so he's been in prison this entire time. When they finally sent him all of this information about the tattoo and his criminal record in March 10th or 11th, the ICE moved him out of maximum security. They're like, okay, well, I guess we don't need to keep him in this hardcore lockup anymore. But then it was March 15th that they just swept him up and put him on the plane and shipped him to El Salvador. April 17th, he's supposed to have a hearing where he would make his case. Now, September 1st is when he was picked up by Biden. Not picked up, he turned himself in at the border. So what's that? September, October, November, December, January, February. No, he's been in 6 months in detention after going from Venezuela to Mexico and getting tortured down there. And so his family saw him in that ASMR social media post that the Trump administration posted.
The Bukele propaganda one. Yeah.
Yeah, where they're shaving the guy's heads and the family's like, whoa, that's hearsay. What the hell is hearsay? What the hell is hearsay doing? So they reached back out to the lawyer, and the lawyer said, well, he doesn't show up in the ICE thing anymore.
Wow.
And after like 3 days of harassing DHS finally confirmed to the lawyer, yeah, he was shipped down to El Salvador. I saw Sean Davis, a prominent conservative attorney, saying, "Oh, this is on the attorney for not filing a habeas."
Sean Davis or Mike Davis?
Sean.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, Sean's not an attorney. He's before.
Oh, he's just a dude. Oh, never mind. Anyway, he was saying something stupid. I won't criticize him though for saying if he just said something stupid.
Non-expert saying something.
There was no
stupid.
chance for the lawyers to do anything here. So, he wasn't in the country. He was in the country, but he was in a detention facility, which is on Biden as well, because it was, this is Biden's ICE, which if you think about when this happened in September, this is the height of the presidential campaign.
True.
When, the Haitian stuff is going on and Tren de Aragua, they're the ones that were taking over the Colorado building. Is that's
complex.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. So like they were like a big thing.
Right.
So ICE was clearly, on the lookout for anybody from Venezuela that they thought might be connected
might
to
have a
this
tattoo
gang.
that is remotely. I mean, the other ones I've seen is like one person, some of the reporting indicated also if you just were from Aragua, which is this Venezuelan state where Tren de Aragua is from, that would be sufficient to, put you in the bucket of like, oh, you must be a gang member. Whereas at least some of those people are actually fleeing the gang violence that had, was endemic to their part of Venezuela. One of the other tattoos is a rose is supposed to be affiliated. Again, there are many
people have rose tattoos, so that'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll really narrow it down. But
the butterfly.
I mean, Emily, this is like, we still, one news outlet did publish the alleged list of everyone who was deported as part of this. But like, obviously we still don't have all the details. But like I said, even the government in this really, I mean, talk about Orwellian. They tried to argue in court that the fact that these guys didn't have any criminal record made them more dangerous because that meant we knew less about them. That was, they argued. But, I mean, according to his family and his lawyers and, and him, this guy, he actually he did the thing that he was supposed to. He got his CBP-1 appointment and showed up at the border and the port of entry where he was supposed to go. He had his appointment. Until he was, arrested as best he could. He was making his court appointments, etc. And I think it just underscores that when you get rid of due process in any instance, it means you're really getting rid of due process for everyone.
And because, Emily, while you ponder this, I can read the DHS statement. Tricia McLaughlin told me, quote, Jersey Reyes Barros was not only in the United States illegally, but he has tattoos that are consistent with those indicating TDA gang membership. His own social media indicates he is a member of the vicious TDA gang. That all said, DHS intelligence assessments go beyond a single tattoo, and we are confident in our findings, unquote. So that's the DHS response.
So I don't know how they're claiming he was in the country illegally if he claimed asylum. And from what we know, based on the drop site reporting you're reporting, Ryan, is that this was a legitimate asylum claim. This is this asylum claim that a Marco Rubio or a Maria Elvira Salazar would like. This is like the proper use, actually, of the asylum program.
Going after our enemy.
Yeah, I mean, historically...
Yeah.
It's only, after Cubans that Venezuelans are beloved by Republicans, because yes, they're fleeing Maduro. And so they have historically gotten better treatment by immigration authorities than, other migrants.
So Hersey's story is the story that I dreaded throughout the Biden administration because it seemed inevitable to me that when you have a flood of 8 million migrants, and thousands of those. It's a small percentage of the overall total, but thousands of them have criminal records that you're going to have to make broad sweeps and targeting in order to like actually reclaim. And Biden knew, by the way, that there was going to be a swing back on immigration policy eventually. And so it was just completely reckless the way that they did this. And like due process, for example, that was part of the reason that part of the reason that you're detaining a guy from Venezuela because he has a crown and a rose tattoo and a social media picture of him like doing the rock and roll symbol is because they broadened the asylum process to the point where you could not mathematically, I mean, the amount of work that we would have had to have done to like rebuild our ability to hear asylum cases, just like there was basically no way to do it. And so it was screwing a lot of legitimate people. Some of them I talked to. The Cuban kid I talked to at the border a couple of years ago was having a hard time getting in and paid over $10,000 to get here, cross the border, had to come back. Like it was just a disaster. And so like it just makes me really, I feel like the Biden administration played with people's lives and for political purposes. And so I think the Trump administration needs to be extremely targeted as it's doing deportations. But I also think it's important to get thousands of criminals who are not just criminals because they crossed the border illegally, but because they're violent criminals. I think it's important to get people like that the hell out of the country. So I don't think the Trump administration is in an easy position, but it just sucks to see this happen and it's wrong. And I hope that the fact that Hersey is Venezuelan and what Krystal said, that is something that Marco Rubio cares a whole lot about. The Aliens and the Alien and Enemies Act sucks. The application of it absolutely sucks here. I don't disagree with any of that, but hopefully the fact that like legit dissidents are getting caught up in this is a wake up sign to Secretary
and I
Rubio.
think that the problem, what this shows is that the Trump administration isn't actually serious about what it's doing because he was already behind bars. So if their concern was
that's a good point.
He's so dangerous that he's going to be out there, attacking college students, that's not you're good. Like you've had this guy locked up for 6 months and he has an appointment on April 17th. You can keep him in lockup for another month. Now, I don't think that they should because I think that his case, warrants being let out on bond, but whatever. Y'all won. If you were worried about him committing crimes, if you're worried about people committing crimes, you'd try to find people who are not behind bars already.
Of course, that's harder.
The ones that are behind bars, exactly. What they want is numbers, and they want warm bodies flown out of the country, and they don't care.
And shocking images.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. Because there's also there's a piece here of wanting to scare people, and there's a piece here of wanting to appease a base that was sold mass deportation, and also was sold. I mean, that a larger number of these migrants are criminals than actually are. They were sold that Trump said, they're emptying out their asylums and sending the worst of the worst. And so when you actually are dealing in reality and the number of immigrants who, actually have criminal records is much, 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 much smaller as a percentage than what has been portrayed to the public, then you've set up a sort of impossible situation. So you have to rely on these like horrific fascist, in my opinion, stunts, like the Guantanamo Bay thing, like the use of military planes, even though they're insanely more expensive. And now this is the most aggressive, most egregious stunt. And it is both a stunt and it is also extremely not just dangerous, but damaging. In the same way that, extraordinary rendition under the War on Terror and torturing people at Guantanamo Bay and all of those things were dangerous and damaging, not just to the people that it happened to, but to everybody. Because, look, if you don't have due process, what is to stop them from taking literally anyone and saying they were a bad person, they were a gang member, they were here illegally. Who are they? What's their story? We don't know. We'll never tell you. They're now disappeared into this prison. And that's why it really is an infringement on all of our rights, not just on the, official baddies that people would want to see removed from the country.
Yeah, and actually, Trump is now, let me see if I can pull this up, threatening, producer Mac just sent this, saying that
he's threatening producer Mac.
Yeah, he's threatening.
Mac,
well,
what did you do now?
By proxy, maybe. Yeah.
I'm sure he would love to threaten producer Mac. Let me wait. Hold on. Let me make sure my DMs are closed.
Well, this is. Let me just say, yeah. Well, let me just say also while you're pulling that up, Brian, that one of the things that does concern me so far is that to answer Krystal's question, I think one of the things that stops them on due process so far is our citizenship, but we don't know what they know about the people who were deported citizens. Like, we actually don't have information about how sure they were that they weren't rounding up actual citizens.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's significant.
Yeah, I mean, I said before, I suspect these are all undocumented immigrants, but we don't actually know that. And ICE has been known. I mean, we've got numerous reports just recently, but this is the case over many administrations. They've gotten it wrong many times. They've detained, arrested, etc., people who were citizens just because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. They looked like they might be undocumented. You know, they were at a place of business where they thought this would, be somebody who was undocumented, etc. So yeah, ICE gets it wrong and screws up all the time. And again, we have no way of actually, without due process, you don't even have a way of knowing that these people, that none of them were U.S. citizens. You don't even have a way of knowing that these are actually even all undocumented immigrants, let alone gang members, let alone criminals, etc.
Yeah, they haven't provided that information sufficiently.
No. And Ryan, did you pulled up the Trump thing?
Yeah, he said, I look forward to watching the sick terrorist thugs get 20-year jail sentences for what they are doing to Elon Musk and Tesla. Perhaps they could serve them in the prisons of El Salvador, which have become so recently famous for such lovely conditions.
So now we're talking about U.S. citizens potentially who dare to vandalize a Tesla or a Tesla charger or Tesla dealership or whatever, who now, are being threatened by the president with being also disappeared into this foreign gulag. So, yeah, when these things are on the table, it doesn't stay with the official baddies that people are primed to hate and want to see the maximum amount of retribution aimed towards.
Juxtapose that with January 6th, by the way. You write F Tesla on a Cybertruck at a dealership or a showroom, and that's domestic terrorism. This is one of the things that the right was arguing, and I think persuasively. And Ryan, I know some of your at the time writers at The Intercept were doing great work on this. I think that's a wildly inappropriate expansion of domestic terrorism, in ways that were absolutely encroaching on people's civil liberties, and there were court cases about all of this. So yeah, it's.
So you can violently attack the Capitol, and that's not domestic terrorism. But if you put a swastika on a Tesla, and that's another matter.
Or you can just be in the proximity. I mean, this happened to some people. You can be in the proximity of what became a violent riot at the Capitol, and you can be, back on the lawn and end up having your house raided. There were crazy cases where the Biden FBI was weaponizing the domestic terrorism thing, and this isn't the Capitol. This is F Tesla and weird Antifa mouth breathers trying to start fires at Tesla showrooms. So yeah.
One last update on this particular story, just to keep us all up to date with, there's a possibility the administration gets held in contempt of court here because the judge is increasingly pissed off. The New York Times says administration's details on deportation flights, quote, woefully insufficient, according to this Judge Boasberg. In an angry order, he told the Trump administration explain why he should not find that officials had violated his instructions for the flights to return to the United States. And this is this whole, a flap over. Judge says from the bench, you have to turn, even if you have to turn the planes around, you cannot deport these people. The planes, 2 of which were already in the air, are not turned around, 1 of which was on the ground. Administration is claiming the one on the ground, the deportees there were pursuant to some other immigration authority, not the Alien Enemies Act. We don't really know if that's the case, but that's what they're claiming. They're also claiming that because it was a verbal order, not a written order, that it really didn't count. And then they've completely stonewalled on just even the basic details of these flights, even though the flight tracker info is public. We know exactly when they took off, where were they at these different times when the judge issued the initial ruling from the bench, when he issued the written ruling ultimately. So they're stonewalling on sort of giving any information, and we're considering invoking state secrets doctrine to keep this information confidential, even though they'd never even indicated that any of this was classified. And they were also out there, like, publishing videos and celebrating videos with a lot of the details of what happened here. So that's kind of where we are. And, this is the highest profile instance of Trump administration, defiance and testing of the court system, and fits a broader pattern. And, obviously they're calling for this guy to be impeached and all of that sort of stuff too.
Well, and one interesting thing here is and this sort of reminds me full circle with what we were talking about with Elon at the very beginning, and how there's almost like you can detect perhaps a modicum of shame in the Pentagon pushing back on this idea that Elon was just getting this like special China briefing. There's almost a little bit of that when you see that Trump is still claiming they didn't defy the judge's orders because of the verbal versus written distinction. And there's legally, it's not an entirely illegitimate case, but I don't know, Ryan. I do find it also interesting that Trump goes on Laura Ingraham this week and says, we won't defy the judge's orders. And the administration is still insisting that they didn't flout the order, but that they had the right to do that, what they did, versus based on the verbal versus written thing. I don't know if that reminds you of the Elon stuff, but that's sort of where it takes me to.
Let me go ahead, and as a last thing here, why don't we pull up the some of the sound from the rallies last night at with AOC and Bernie, and they sort of joined forces and did a series of rallies out west in Vegas and one maybe in Arizona. I don't know, Ryan, maybe you know all the details of where the rallies were, but quite a lot of energy on the ground. And I think AOC really kind of finding her voice here on the Fight Oligarchy tour. Let me just go ahead and play a little bit of what she had to say here so we can take a listen to her speech.
Fox News and the right wing will have you believe that these American values are something out of the Communist Manifesto. That we believe these things because we went to college and read them in a book somewhere. But let me tell you, Fox News, I don't believe these things. I don't believe in healthcare, labor, and human dignity because I'm a Marxist. I believe it because I was a waitress. Because I scrubbed toilets with my mom to go to school. Because I've worked double shifts to keep the lights on. And because on my worst day, I know what it feels like to feel left behind.
Ryan, what did you think of AOC's performance here and sort of the role that she's occupying? I mean, there's a lot of talk about who's Bernie Sanders going to sort of put his hands on as this is the next Bernie and this is who he's leaving his legacy to. I mean, it seems pretty clear that person is AOC, right?
Yeah, and it's the mantle's there for her to take it if she wants. And you heard her there leaning, much more into the class argument than she has, recently. And the advantage that she has is that the right kind of loves to make fun of her for being a waitress.
Alina Habba just did that recently, I think, right? Yeah.
They fall into that trap constantly. So they are constantly reinforcing her own message for her by being class snobs themselves. So she has an opportunity to do that if she can not get too tangled up in some of the Democrats' less popular cultural stuff.
What do you think, Emily?
Well, I think we should get the man who wrote the book The Squad on sometime to talk about all of this.
To dig into it.
It's just an idea. But no, this is also really powerful right now for Democrats. It's a huge gift for Democrats that the populist Trump administration is stocked with billionaires that are not, Trump is singular in the respect that he can get away with this sort of blue collar billionaire thing for whatever reason. We could get into that, but Elon Musk cannot, Howard Lutnick cannot, Scott Bessent cannot. They're not the same. And so
Bessent is a mere 500 millionaire, Emily, by the way. I don't want you to, mislead our audience
there. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Important correction. But truly, he's surrounding himself with plutocrats and some of whom, many of whom are actual billionaires. And so it's this is a different version of Trump populism. And that's very obvious. And so as Democrats look to rebuild, they have this incredible gift right in front of them that the Alyssa Slotkins and Gavin Newsoms of the world are probably not going to be able to capitalize on. So it's kind of in an odd way, a huge moment for the populist left, because they're the best positioned to help Democrats regain power in this moment where the Trump administration is bringing working class voters into the Republican Party at a pretty steady clip in ways that Democrats never envisioned Trump would be able to do, or that Republicans would be able to do. And so here you have an opportunity to capitalize on that. And the culture stuff is going to get interesting. The sort of dance as to how Democrats handle that and how AOC and Bernie handle that going forward will be interesting. But it's a gift. This is a real moment for Democrats, and does Chuck Schumer allow the AOCs, like maybe he won't have a choice if they keep doing rallies like this.
I mean, you had, I think, what was it, Michael Bennett that came out yesterday and was like, Schumer needs to go. I mean, you've got some like real centrists who are like, we're done with this. And it's emblematic of the fact that the liberal base revolt, it's really not ideological. They want to see people fight. And the people, by and large, who are fighting right now are the populist left. I mean, Bernie and AOC really are kind of leading the charge here and charting the path forward. Bernie starts this tour, and now you've got a bunch of other Democrats who are sort of following, saying, yes, this is a good idea. Let's go out and do these town halls. Tim Walz is making a lot of noise out there, too. And I think, establishing himself as a potential player for 2028 as well. And so they really have charted the course. And you do have, because of the nature of Elon and Zuckerberg and Bezos and Lutnick and all the cast of characters of the billionaire oligarchs that are circling the Trump administration and running the Trump administration, you do also have this organic, class reaction against that. I don't know if, I'm sure you guys probably saw the town hall, some Republican town hall, Mike Flood, maybe that's his name. I don't remember. Anyway, the people who were there, who were there to confront him, they started organically chanting, tax the rich. So even though there isn't a lot of ideology in the sort of liberal base fight, because they're being polarized against Elon, there is a class dimension that is organically developing that is different than the resistance that you saw against Trump that was about Russia and these other things back in the 2017, 2018 era of this. And then also what's different is the fact that they're disgusted with Democratic leadership, and they're disgusted with people like Gavin Newsom, who is there saying let's have Charlie Kirk on and hang out with him, and Steve Bannon, and they're really interesting and I'm so impressed with them, etc. There is a real disgust with that approach that was not there in the past. This is the first time that Democrats have said, no, you need to gum up the works. You need to, I'm talking about the base. You need to not work with Trump or the Republicans at all, even though it felt like there was a very strong resistance last time. Actually, polling wise, you still had a super majority of Democrats who were try to work with the Republicans to get things done. And so it is a very different energy here. And I'll tell you, I was an AOC skeptic of her being able to, really hold her own on a national stage because of all the way that she leaned into, the language and the identity politics and whatever. But I'm becoming more of a believer the more that I see her out there and the more that she is meeting this moment. And this speech, Ryan, to me was a real case in point. She really kind of nailed it in terms of the language, the approach, the argument that she made, and the way she positioned herself in that narrative as well.
Yeah. More of that. I think there's nobody else really. I'm sure that, Ro Khanna would love to pick up that mantle. I'm sure Pramila Jayapal would love to pick up that mantle for various reasons. She has the pole position there. She's suffered, a blow on the left over the last, several years. But I don't think it means she couldn't recover the position, particularly if she's consistently out there with Bernie.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's right. And if she's just consistently out there, I mean, that's the thing too, is she understands. She and Bernie did an interview with Hassan Piker yesterday before their events. She's constantly on Instagram Lives and on Twitter and isn't afraid of controversy, isn't afraid of Republicans coming after her because she's been through that fire at this point a million times. And, I think understanding the actual media landscape is a very rare quality within the Democratic Party, Emily, at this point.
Yeah, 100%. And again, like most of the energy right now that can be capitalized on, it's not going to be capitalized on by Alyssa Slotkin and Gavin Newsom. It's so abundantly clear. And the only thing I wanted to say,
it's not abundantly clear to them, apparently, but to everybody else it is. Yeah.
But this is where the Trump example is relevant, in that Trump gave Republicans no choice. He left them with no choice. He was so popular in the 2015-2016 primary that they had zero choice but to end up going along with him.
True.
And then when they tried to thwart him, they still ended up having to go along with Trump. They couldn't run DeSantis. He just steamrolls it. And that's, you know, I'm not saying there's any like direct parallel, but in terms of populism, that's what Bernie and AOC have to do for Democrats. They have to give them no choice but to side with populists. And it doesn't mean that they won't be thwarted by the Chuck Schumers and whomever if they ascend to power, but they have to show that that is what the voters want. And so the rallies are in the tour, and going on Hassan with the kind of setup of the rally behind you, very Trumpian. It sort of sends the message that this is your option. It is not going to be abundance. It is going to be populism.
How dare you mention that word? That could kick off another 3-hour conversation.
I'm for scarcity, frankly.
We had Derek on. Well, you guys interviewed Ezra, right?
Yeah.
You actually should get Ezra back. You guys should do a thing with him. I mean, I talked to Derek. I think you guys would have a great conversation with Ezra. That could be really interesting. In any case, anything else, guys, before we wrap it up here?
The UN just announced that Gaza has 6 days of flour left, which that means that in a lot of places there's 0 left.
Yeah.
So for people living on just nothing but bread, like that, even that's going to be gone soon. So it's bleak. Very bleak.
Extremely bleak. Emily, anything else on your radar?
No,
so to speak.
Did you see that Rising doesn't do radars anymore?
Do they not?
They do memos.
Oh, really?
I think it was memo. Is that right, Emily?
I forget, but you're right. It was different.
Or notebook or something. Anyway,
it was something like that. But it's basically a radar.
How do you give up on radars? Come on.
Krystal,
I don't know.
Did you name the radar?
Yeah. I don't remember how, but yeah, I did. And Rising was my name too.
Really?
Yeah. It's a great name. It's a really good name. Like it's a fantastic morning show name, I have to say.
It is. Yeah.
So I'm glad they're sticking with the Rising name. I guess, I don't know. It was always weird, very weird. Now this was so long ago at this point that we were doing Rising. We've been doing Breaking Points far longer than we ever did Rising. But it was weird at first to see other people be like, what's on your radar? It's like, that's Arla. What are you doing? So I'm fine to see them move on to their own terminology and, do their own thing. That's perfectly fine at this point.
Now you can start doing radars again.
Yeah, that's true. I guess so.
What's on your radar today, Sagar? That's gonna rattle you back to 2019.
Yeah, there's a lot of memories associated with that moment. That was back when I thought, Bernie might actually win. So
full circle.
There's a lot of pain involved in that period. All right, guys. Fun as always. Great to talk to you both. Hope you have a great weekend. I'm going to be off next week because my kids have spring break. And so Ryan is going to be in for me. Enjoy, Ryan. I'm going to have a hard time. I'm not going to separate from the news. I already know. I just can't. I feel like if you miss a week of news, you're going to have no idea what's going on. You're going to miss 85 really important, consequential things. So anyway,
we've got you covered.
Yeah.
I expect the DM stream to be fairly steady.
It will be. And my plan is I'll just, in lieu of doing the show, I'll just do more TikToks is kind of what I'm thinking to do. So in any case, Ryan, thank you for filling in. Emily, great to see you. Have a great weekend, guys. And I will see you upon return.
Sounds good.